The black belt's fist closed around the teenager's hair and yanked him to his knees on the scorching Phoenix pavement. Danny screamed as his prosthetic leg scraped against concrete. Blood trickled from his scalp where hair ripped from the roots. "Crawl, cripple!" Victor Crane roared, spit flying from his lips. "Crawl and beg for mercy!" Dozens of witnesses turned away. Nobody dared to intervene. But across the parking lot, a man with a Belgian Malinois stopped walking. His eyes locked onto the violence. His dog began to growl. Victor Crane had just made the worst mistake of his life. He had no idea he was staring down a Navy SEAL. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe and stay until the very end. You won't believe what happens next. The Arizona sun was merciless that July afternoon, but Marcus Cole had learned to endure far worse. He had spent 14 years in places where the heat could kill a man faster than a bullet, where the sand got into everything, where survival meant staying alert every single second. Phoenix felt almost comfortable by comparison. Marcus was 34 years old, built like a man who had earned every muscle through necessity rather than vanity. His dark hair was cropped short in the military fashion he had never abandoned, and his brown eyes carried a weight that most people couldn't understand. He walked with a slight limp, a souvenir from his last deployment that the doctors said would fade with time. The physical therapists had recommended walking, so Marcus walked. But he never walked alone. Shadow moved beside him like a living extension of his own body. The Belgian Malinois was 4 years old, with a sleek coat the color of burnt caramel and eyes that missed nothing. Shadow had saved Marcus's life twice overseas. He had detected explosives tracked enemies through impossible terrain, and once dragged Marcus behind cover when a sniper's bullet had torn through his thigh. They were bonded in a way that civilians could never fully understand. Marcus had parked his truck near a strip mall to grab a bottle of water from the convenience store. The complex was typical Phoenix sprawl, a collection of businesses baking in the desert heat. A nail salon, a tax preparation office, a pawn shop, and dominating the corner with an obnoxious black and red facade, a martial arts academy called Iron Dragon Combat Academy. Marcus noticed the academy because of the motorcycle parked on the sidewalk directly in front of the entrance. It was a custom chopper cherry red with chrome that gleamed like liquid silver. It was parked illegally, blocking half the pedestrian walkway, forcing people to step into the parking lot to get around it. The bike probably cost more than most of these shoppers made in a year. Shadow's ears rotated forward, catching a sound Marcus couldn't hear yet. The dog's posture changed, almost imperceptibly. A subtle tension that Marcus had learned to read like a book. Something was wrong. Then Marcus heard it too. A voice, loud and aggressive, cutting through the ambient noise of the parking lot. "You think sorry fixes this? You think sorry is going to pay for the detail on my chrome?" Marcus turned toward the sound. His heart rate remained steady, but his focus sharpened with the automatic precision of a man trained to assess threats in milliseconds. A young man was on his knees in front of the motorcycle. He was wearing a delivery uniform, a red polo shirt with a pizza company logo, and he was shaking so badly that the insulated delivery bag in his hands was trembling. But what made Marcus's jaw tighten was the hand gripping the young man's hair. The hand belonged to a man in his late 40s with a shaved head and a physique that screamed steroids rather than discipline. He wore a black martial arts uniform with so many patches and stripes that it looked like a military general's dress coat. A thick black belt was wrapped around his waist, and his face was twisted into an expression of pure theatrical rage. "I asked you a question, cripple!" the man screamed, yanking the young man's head back. How are you going to pay for this?" Marcus saw it then. The young man's left leg, below the knee, it wasn't flesh and bone. It was a prosthetic, a functional model without any cosmetic covering, just metal and carbon fiber. The prosthetic had a slight angle that suggested it had caught on something, probably the uneven sidewalk, causing the stumble that had apparently splashed a drink onto the precious motorcycle. "I'm sorry, sir," the young man gasped, his voice cracking with fear and humiliation. "I'll pay for it. I'll clean it right now. Please, I need this job. I can't lose this job." "You should have thought about that before you attacked my property." The bald man shook the young man's head like a rag doll. "Do you know who I am? I'm Victor Crane. I'm a grandmaster. I own this shopping center. I own this whole block." Spectators had gathered, emerging from the stores, with bags in their hands and horror on their faces. A mother pulled her children behind her, shielding their eyes. An elderly man with a cane looked like he wanted to intervene, but couldn't find the courage. A teenage girl had her phone out recording, but her hands were trembling too much to hold it steady. Nobody moved to help. Nobody said a word. Marcus understood. He had seen this dynamic in villages overseas, in communities terrorized by local warlords who ruled through fear. People learned to look away to survive by not becoming targets themselves. It was human nature, and he didn't judge them for it. But Marcus Cole was not built to look away. "Shadow heel," Marcus said quietly, and the Belgian Malinois fell into perfect position at his left knee. Together they walked toward the confrontation with the measured pace of a man who had all the time in the world. Victor Crane was so focused on his victim that he didn't notice the approach until Marcus was 10 feet away. When he finally looked up, his eyes swept over Marcus with the dismissive assessment of a predator evaluating a potential challenger. Marcus knew what Victor saw. A man in civilian clothes, jeans, and a plain gray t-shirt, nothing impressive. A slight limp that suggested weakness. A dog that, while impressive, was just a dog. Victor saw prey, not a predator. "Walk away, buddy," Victor said, his voice dripping with contempt. "This doesn't concern you." Marcus stopped. Shadow sat immediately, his amber eyes locking onto Victor with an intensity that made the spectators take an involuntary step back. "Let go of the boy," Marcus said. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the parking lot like a blade through silk. There was no anger in it, no excitement. Just absolute certainty. Victor's eyes narrowed. He was used to people backing down when he raised his voice, used to winning through intimidation. This stranger's calm was unexpected, and it made something twist in Victor's gut, but his ego was too large to permit retreat. "Or what?" Victor sneered. He released the young man's hair and shoved him forward, sending him sprawling onto the hot asphalt. The delivery bag burst open, scattering pizza boxes across the pavement. "You want to be a hero? You want to play savior for this pathetic cripple?" The young man scrambled to gather the ruined pizzas, his face burning with shame, his prosthetic leg scraping against the ground as he struggled to find his balance. Marcus didn't look at the young man. He kept his eyes fixed on Victor, reading the bully's stance, his breathing the tension in his shoulders. Marcus had spent years studying how men moved, how they telegraphed their intentions, how their bodies betrayed their fears. Victor Crane was afraid. Behind all the muscle and the screaming and the patches on his uniform, he was a hollow man, terrified of being exposed. "I want you to apologize to him," Marcus said simply. "Then I want you to move your motorcycle off the sidewalk. Then I want you to go back inside your school and think about what kind of man screams at a teenager over a drop of soda." The crowd murmured. Someone laughed nervously. Victor's face turned a deep, ugly shade of crimson. "Do you know what I could do to you?" Victor stepped forward, puffing out his chest, trying to use his bulk to intimidate. I'm a 6th-degree black belt. I've trained fighters who compete professionally. I could break every bone in your body. Shadow stood up. The movement was smooth, unhurried, but there was something in it that made Victor freeze. The dog didn't growl, didn't bare his teeth. He simply stood there. Every muscle coiled, his eyes fixed on Victor with a focus that was almost hypnotic. Your dog doesn't scare me, Victor said, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. He should, Marcus replied. Shadow has served 3 combat deployments. He's trained to take down armed combatants. But don't worry, he only attacks on command. I'm the one you should be worried about. For a moment, something flickered in Victor's eyes. Doubt, uncertainty, the primal recognition that he was facing something he didn't understand. But Victor Crane had built his entire identity on being the biggest, the strongest, the most dangerous man in any room. His ego couldn't survive backing down in front of this crowd. You want a piece of me, Victor shouted, playing to the audience now. Fine, I challenge you tomorrow noon on my mat. We'll see how tough you are when there's no dog to hide behind. We'll see what you're made of, hero. Marcus looked at the young man who had finally gathered the scattered pizzas and pulled himself to his feet. The teenager's face was streaked with tears he was trying desperately to hide. His delivery uniform was torn. His hands were scraped from the fall, and his prosthetic leg had a new scratch in the metal. But it was his eyes that made Marcus's decision. They were the eyes of someone who had been beaten down so many times that he had forgotten what it felt like to stand up. Marcus had seen those eyes before, in refugees, in prisoners, in victims of violence around the world. He had sworn an oath to protect people with eyes like that. What's your name? Marcus asked the young man gently. Danny, the teenager whispered. Danny Reeves. Danny, Marcus nodded. I'm Marcus, and I promise you this man is never going to hurt you again. Victor laughed, a harsh barking sound. Touching. Really touching. So tomorrow at noon? Or are you going to run away like a coward? Marcus turned back to Victor, and something in his expression made the laughter die in the bully's throat. I'll be there, Marcus said. And Victor, you're going to regret every single thing you've done to this boy and everyone else in this community. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Marcus whistled softly, and Shadow fell into step beside him. Together they walked toward Danny, positioning themselves between the young man and the bully. Come on, Danny, Marcus said. Let me buy you a cup of coffee. We need to talk. As they walked away, Victor shouted threats and insults at their backs, performing for the crowd that was now buzzing with whispered speculation. But Marcus didn't look back. He had what he needed. He had a mission. Victor Crane didn't know it yet, but he had just declared war on the wrong man. The coffee shop was nearly empty, the afternoon heat keeping most sensible people indoors or at the pool. Marcus chose a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance, a habit so ingrained he didn't even think about it anymore. Shadow curled up under the table, his head resting on his paws, but his ears remained alert. Danny Reeves sat across from Marcus, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. Up close, the teenager looked even younger than 19. His face still had the softness of adolescence, and his brown eyes were red-rimmed from crying he was too proud to acknowledge. You shouldn't have done that, Danny said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. He's going to destroy you tomorrow. He's a real fighter. He's got trophies and everything. Marcus took a slow sip of his own coffee. Tell me about him. Tell me everything. Danny laughed bitterly. What's there to tell? Victor Crane owns half this neighborhood. He runs that martial arts school, but that's just the surface. He's got his fingers in everything. Protection fees from the business's loans to people who can't get credit anywhere else. He's like a mob boss in a karate costume. How did you get involved with him? Danny's face crumpled. He looked down at the table, his fingers tightening around the coffee cup. It wasn't me. It was my grandmother, Ruth. She's got Alzheimer's advanced stage. She doesn't always know where she is or who I am. About 6 months ago, she wandered out of our apartment and ended up at his school. By the time I found her, she had signed something. A lifetime membership contract. $15,000. Marcus's jaw tightened. She signed a contract while experiencing dementia symptoms. His salespeople are trained for it. Danny said, the bitterness in his voice deepening. They target confused people, elderly people, anyone who might say yes without understanding what they're agreeing to. When I tried to cancel it, Victor laughed in my face, said a contract is a contract, said he'd take me to court and take everything I had. Have you talked to a lawyer? Danny shook his head. I can't afford a lawyer. I can barely afford my grandmother's care. Her memory center costs $4,000 a month and insurance only covers half. I work 3 jobs, deliveries night shifts at a warehouse and weekends at a car wash. And now Victor is garnishing my wages. He got some judge to sign off on it. I get my paycheck, and 1/3 of it goes straight to him. Marcus felt the cold fire igniting in his chest. He recognized the pattern now. Victor Crane wasn't just a bully. He was a predator who had built a system designed to crush vulnerable people and extract every dollar from their suffering. How long has this been going on? 6 months. Danny finally looked up, and there was something broken in his eyes. I used to think if I just kept my head down, if I just worked hard enough, I could dig myself out. But every week I fall further behind. And Victor, he enjoys it. He finds excuses to see me, to remind me that I'm nothing. Today wasn't the first time he's humiliated me in public. He likes having an audience. Marcus leaned forward. Danny, I need you to understand something. That man is not invincible. He's not powerful. He's a parasite who feeds on people's fear. And parasites die when you cut off their food supply. What are you going to do? Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm going to fight him tomorrow, and I'm going to win. But that's just the beginning. I'm going to dismantle everything he's built. I'm going to expose every lie, every scam, every crime. And when I'm done, he's going to be begging you for forgiveness. Danny stared at him. Who are you? I mean, really. Regular people don't talk like that. Regular people don't look at Victor Crane like he's nothing. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Beneath the table, Shadow shifted, pressing his warm body against Marcus's leg. I spent 14 years in the Navy, Marcus said finally. Special operations. I've been to places you've never heard of, done things that still keep me awake at night. I made an oath when I enlisted to defend those who cannot defend themselves. That oath doesn't expire just because I'm stateside. That oath doesn't have a discharge date. Danny's eyes widened. You're a SEAL. Was. Technically, I'm on medical leave. Marcus glanced down at his leg. Took some shrapnel in a bad place. Doctors say I'll make a full recovery, but it takes time. So I've been wandering, trying to figure out what comes next. And then I saw you. I saw what that man did to you, and I knew exactly what comes next. For the first time since they sat down, something shifted in Danny's expression. The hopelessness receded, just slightly replaced by something fragile and tentative. Hope. You really think you can beat him? Marcus laughed softly. Danny, I've fought terrorists, insurgents, and trained military operatives. Victor Crane runs a strip mall karate school. The fight itself is going to last about 30 seconds. What matters is what happens after. Danny nodded slowly. Then he did something Marcus hadn't expected. He reached across the table and grabbed Marcus's hand, squeezing it with desperate intensity. Thank you, Danny whispered. I don't care if you win or lose tomorrow. Thank you for standing up. Nobody has ever stood up for me. Not since my dad died." Marcus looked at this broken young man carrying the weight of a sick grandmother, a dead father, a missing leg, and a community that had turned its back on him. And something shifted in Marcus's chest. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was personal. "Tell me about your father," Marcus said. Danny's grip on Marcus's hand tightened. "He was a Marine, Sergeant First Class Raymond Reeves. He did 2 tours in Afghanistan. He survived IEDs, firefights, everything the enemy threw at him. And then he came home and died in a car accident." Danny's voice cracked, but he pushed through. "I was 17. I was in the car with him. Drunk driver ran a red light, hit us broadside, my dad's side. He was killed instantly. I lost my leg below the knee. Woke up in the hospital, and the first thing I saw was my grandmother crying by my bed. She told me my father was gone, and then she told me I had to be strong. For her. For the family." Danny released Marcus's hand and wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "That was 2 years ago. Grandma's mind started going about 6 months later. The doctor said it was the stress, the grief. Like losing her son broke something in her brain. Now most days she doesn't even recognize me. She calls me Raymond sometimes. She thinks I'm my father." Marcus sat in silence, absorbing the weight of Danny's story. He thought about his own father, a cop in Detroit, who had taught Marcus that a man's worth was measured by how he treated those weaker than himself. He thought about the Marines he had served alongside men like Raymond Reeves, who had sacrificed everything for their country only to be forgotten when they came home. And he thought about Victor Crane, who had looked at this grieving, struggling young man and seen nothing but an opportunity for profit. The cold fire in Marcus's chest burned hotter. "Danny," Marcus said, his voice steady and firm, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. Your father was a hero. He served his country with honor, and he died protecting you. That sacrifice means something. It means you have value. It means your life matters. And it means that anyone who tries to take your dignity is spitting on your father's grave." Danny was crying openly now, tears streaming down his face. "I've been so tired," Danny sobbed. "I've been so tired of fighting alone. Some nights I just want to give up. I want to stop caring. But then I think about Grandma, and I can't. I can't abandon her. She's all I have left." Marcus reached across the table and placed his hand on Danny's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore," Marcus said. "Not today. Not tomorrow. Not until this is finished. Do you understand me? You are not alone." Danny nodded, unable to speak. His body shaking with the release of 2 years of suppressed grief and fear. Under the table, Shadow whined softly and nuzzled Danny's prosthetic leg with his nose. It was a gesture of comfort that made Danny laugh through his tears. "Your dog is amazing," Danny said, reaching down to scratch Shadow's ears. "He's the best partner I've ever had," Marcus agreed. "And he's an excellent judge of character. If Shadow likes you, that means you're good people." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, letting the emotional intensity of the conversation settle. Finally, Danny took a deep breath and straightened in his seat. "What do you need from me?" Danny asked. "For tomorrow, I mean. For whatever you're planning." Marcus smiled. "I need information. Everything you know about Victor Crane. His business, his enemies, his weaknesses. I need to know about the contracts, the protection fees, the loans. I need names and addresses and numbers." Danny nodded eagerly. "I can do that. I've been keeping records. Not because I had any plan, just because I thought maybe someday someone would care enough to ask." "Someone cares now," Marcus said. "And Danny, I need one more thing. Anything. I need you to be there tomorrow. At the fight. I need you to stand in that crowd and watch me take him down. And when it's over, I need you to look him in the eye. Can you do that?" Danny's jaw set with a determination Marcus hadn't seen before. The broken young man was beginning to remember what it felt like to have a spine. "I'll be there," Danny said. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Marcus stood dropping a $20 bill on the table. Shadow rose fluidly, immediately taking position at Marcus's left knee. Get some rest tonight, Marcus said. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. And Danny, whatever happens, remember what I told you. You're not alone anymore. Danny watched Marcus and Shadow walk out of the coffee shop and into the blazing Arizona afternoon. For the first time in 2 years, he felt something stirring in his chest. It felt like hope. It felt like the first spark of a fire that had been cold for far too long. Danny didn't know who Marcus Cole really was. He didn't understand the world of special operations of combat, of the men who moved through darkness so that others could live in light. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Victor Crane had no idea what was coming for him. Marcus walked through the parking lot, Shadow matching his stride perfectly. His mind was already working through the operational parameters of the coming confrontation. The fight itself was irrelevant. Victor Crane was a showman, not a warrior. He had built his reputation on intimidation and flashy moves designed to impress suburban parents, not survive actual combat. Marcus could end him in seconds. But ending Victor physically wasn't the goal. The goal was total destruction. The goal was exposing every lie, dismantling every scheme, and ensuring that Victor Crane could never hurt anyone again. That required intelligence, that required planning, that required patience. Marcus reached his truck and opened the passenger door for Shadow, who jumped inside with practiced ease. He walked around to the driver's side, pausing for a moment to look back at the Iron Dragon Combat Academy. Through the tinted windows, he could see Victor Crane pacing inside, probably ranting to his sycophantic students about the fight tomorrow, probably convincing himself that he was going to crush the stranger who had embarrassed him. Let him believe that. Let him feel confident and safe. Marcus had learned long ago that overconfidence was the deadliest weakness a man could have. It made you blind to threats. It made you sloppy. It made you vulnerable. Victor Crane was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Marcus climbed into his truck, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. He had work to do. He needed to confirm Victor's credentials or lack thereof. He needed to document the financial crimes. He needed to identify potential allies in the community and potential threats among Victor's associates. He needed to prepare the battlefield. But as he drove through the Phoenix streets, his mind kept returning to Danny Reeves, to the prosthetic leg and the dead father and the grandmother who called him by his father's name, to the tears of a young man who had been fighting alone for 2 years without hope. Marcus had sworn an oath to defend this country, but countries were made of people. And right now the person who needed defending was a 19-year-old kid with one leg and a broken heart. Tomorrow, Marcus would honor that oath. Tomorrow, Victor Crane would learn what it meant to challenge a Navy SEAL. And nothing would ever be the same again. Marcus spent the next 4 hours doing what he did best: gathering intelligence. He started at a small diner called Rosie's Kitchen, 3 blocks from the Iron Dragon Academy. The place smelled like bacon grease and strong coffee, and the woman behind the counter had the weathered face of someone who had seen too much of life's cruelty. Her name was Marlene, and she had owned the diner for 32 years. "You're the one who stood up to Victor today," Marlene said, refilling Marcus's coffee without being asked. Her hands were trembling slightly. "Word travels fast around here." "Does it bother you that I did?" Marlene laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Bother me, honey. I wanted to applaud, but I couldn't. None of us could. You don't understand what that man does to people who cross him. Marcus leaned forward. Tell me. Marlene glanced around the empty diner, then lowered her voice. 3 years ago, there was a bakery next door, owned by a sweet couple, the Hendersons. They'd been there 20 years. When Victor moved in, he started charging protection fees, said it was for security for keeping the neighborhood safe. The Hendersons refused to pay. What happened? Their windows got smashed. Twice. Then someone slashed their delivery van tires. Then the health inspector started showing up every week finding violations that didn't exist. The Hendersons tried to fight back, but Victor has friends. Lawyers, judges, people in City Hall. Within 6 months, the bakery was closed. Mrs. Henderson had a stroke from the stress. She's in a nursing home now. Mr. Henderson moved to Tucson to be closer to their daughter. They lost everything. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. And everyone just let it happen. What choice did we have? Marlene's eyes filled with tears. I pay Victor $500 a month. Every business on this block does. If we don't pay, we disappear. It's extortion, plain and simple, but the police don't care. Victor's brother-in-law is a detective. His cousin works in the prosecutor's office. He's untouchable. Nobody is untouchable, Marcus said quietly. Marlene studied his face for a long moment. Then she reached under the counter and pulled out a worn notebook. I've been keeping records, she whispered. Dates, amounts, everything. I told myself someday someone would come along who could actually do something. Maybe that's you. Maybe it's not. But if you're going to fight him, you should know what you're really up against. Marcus took the notebook. Thank you, Marlene. This helps more than you know. Just promise me one thing. Marlene grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Don't lose. Because if you lose, he's going to make our lives a living hell. He's going to make an example of everyone who talked to you today. I don't lose, Marcus said. Not when it matters. He left a $50 tip and walked out into the afternoon heat. Shadow was waiting in the truck, alert and watchful. Marcus climbed in and opened Marlene's notebook, scanning the pages of meticulous handwriting. The scope of Victor's operation was staggering. Protection fees from at least 15 businesses, predatory loan contracts targeting elderly residents, fraudulent martial arts certifications sold for thousands of dollars, and something else. Something that made Marcus's blood run cold. References to supplement shipments arriving twice a month from an address in Mexico. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. Petty Officer Cole? A gravelly voice answered. I was wondering when you'd check in. Chief Martinez, I need a favor. Chief Eduardo Martinez was Marcus's former commanding officer, now working in naval intelligence. They had served together for 8 years, and Marcus would trust him with his life. Name it. I need a background check on a civilian. Victor Crane runs a martial arts school in Phoenix. Claims to be a 6th-degree black belt. I need to know if that's real, and I need to know everything else about him. This related to your recovery leave. Marcus hesitated. It's related to doing what's right. Martinez was quiet for a moment. Give me 2 hours. I'll call you back. Marcus ended the call and drove to the public library. He spent the next hour on the computers searching through court records, business filings, and martial arts association databases. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Victor Crane had been expelled from the National Martial Arts Association 5 years ago. The charges included gross financial fraud, falsification of tournament records, and endangering students through negligent instruction. His rank had been revoked. His certifications had been invalidated. Every belt he had awarded since then was worthless. But there was more. Victor had moved around a lot. Phoenix was his 4th city in 6 years. In each previous location, he had established the same pattern: open a martial arts school, target vulnerable populations, extract money through fraudulent contracts. When things got too hot, disappear and start over somewhere else. He was a professional predator. Marcus printed the documents, folded them carefully, and placed them in his jacket pocket. This was the ammunition he needed, not for the fight, but for what came after. His phone buzzed. Martinez. "What did you find?" "Your boy Victor is dirty," Martinez said. "Real dirty. DEA has him flagged as a person of interest in a steroid distribution network. They haven't been able to make a case because he's careful, but they're watching. If you can get them evidence of an actual transaction, they'll move on him." "What about local law enforcement?" "Compromised. His brother-in-law is Detective Frank Mercer, and from what I can tell, Mercer has been burying complaints about Victor for years. You won't get help from the Phoenix PD, not through official channels." Marcus processed this information. The situation was worse than he had thought. Victor Crane had built a fortress of corruption around himself, insulating his criminal enterprise with family connections and bought officials. But every fortress had a weakness. "Thanks, Chief. I owe you one." "You owe me about 15, but who's counting Marcus? Be careful. Men like this don't fight fair. They'll come at you sideways." "I'm counting on it," Marcus said. He ended the call and checked his watch. It was almost 6 in the evening. He needed to find Danny, make sure the kid was safe, and prepare for whatever Victor was planning. Because Marcus knew with absolute certainty that Victor wouldn't wait for tomorrow's fight. Men like Victor Crane attacked when you weren't looking. Marcus drove to the address Danny had given him, a rundown apartment complex on the wrong side of Phoenix. The building looked tired with peeling paint and windows covered in bars. It was the kind of place where dreams went to die. He found Danny sitting on the front steps, his head in his hands. Shadow whined softly, sensing the young man's distress. "Danny." Marcus approached carefully. "What happened?" Danny looked up, and Marcus saw that he had been crying again. But this time the tears were fresh, and there was something new in his eyes. Despair. "They fired me," Danny whispered. "All 3 jobs. Gone. Just like that." Marcus sat down beside him. "Tell me." "The pizza place called first. Said they got a complaint from a customer about my attitude. I've never had a complaint in 2 years. Then the warehouse called. Said they were restructuring and didn't need me anymore. And the car wash. The owner told me straight up. He said Victor Crane came by and told him that anyone who employed me would regret it." Danny's voice cracked. "He's destroying my life, Marcus. He's taking everything. I won't be able to pay rent. I won't be able to afford Grandma's care. They'll put her in a state facility. She'll die there. She'll die alone and confused, calling for a son who's already dead." Marcus felt the cold fire in his chest burn hotter than it ever had before. This was Victor's retaliation. This was how bullies operated. They couldn't face you directly, so they attacked everyone around you. They burned your life to the ground while you watched helplessly. But Marcus wasn't helpless. And neither was Danny. "Look at me," Marcus said firmly. Danny raised his tear-streaked face. "This is exactly what he wants. He wants you broken. He wants you on your knees begging for mercy. That's how he wins. That's how he's always won, but he made a mistake this time." "What mistake?" "He picked a fight with me." Marcus's voice was hard as steel. "And I don't break, I don't beg, and I don't lose. Your grandmother is not going to a state facility. You are not going to lose your apartment. Victor Crane is going to pay for every single thing he's done to you, and he's going to pay with interest." Danny shook his head. "How?" "He has all the power. He has the money, the connections, everything." "He has fear," Marcus corrected. "That's all he has. He makes people afraid, and then he controls them through that fear. But fear only works if you let it. Tomorrow, I'm going to show everyone in that neighborhood that Victor Crane is a coward and a fraud. And once they see him fall, they're going to stop being afraid. They're going to start fighting back. And then his whole empire comes crashing down. Danny stared at Marcus, wanting to believe, but afraid to hope. "Why do you care?" Danny asked. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why are you doing this?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. He handed it to Danny. The photo showed a younger Marcus in his dress uniform standing next to an older man with the same brown eyes and the same stubborn jaw. They were both smiling. "That's my father," Marcus said. "Thomas Cole. He was a cop in Detroit for 35 years. He taught me that a man's worth is measured by how he treats those weaker than himself. He said that the strong have a duty to protect the weak, and that anyone who uses their strength to hurt the vulnerable is the lowest form of human being." Marcus took the photo back, looking at it with a mixture of love and grief. "My dad died 4 years ago. Heart attack. He was chasing a mugger who had stolen an old woman's purse. He caught the guy, got the purse back, and then collapsed in the street, died before the ambulance arrived." Danny was silent, recognizing the weight of shared loss. "I do this because it's what he would have done," Marcus continued. "I do this because your father would have done the same thing for my family. Marines and SEALs, we're brothers in arms. Your dad served his country with honor. The least I can do is make sure his son is treated with the dignity he deserves." Danny's lower lip trembled. "I wish I could have met your father." "He would have liked you," Marcus said. "He had a soft spot for stubborn kids who refused to quit." For the first time that evening, Danny smiled. It was small and fragile, but it was real. "Now," Marcus said, standing up, "I need you to do something for me. I need you to take me to your grandmother. I want to meet her." Danny looked surprised. "Why? Because she's part of this. Because Victor Crane used her to get to you, and that makes her a victim too. And because I want to see what we're fighting for." Danny nodded and led Marcus into the building. They climbed 2 flights of stairs and walked down a dimly lit hallway to apartment 2C. Danny pulled out his keys, hesitated, then turned to Marcus. "She might not make sense," Danny warned. "Most days she lives in the past. She thinks I'm my father. She thinks my father is still alive. Sometimes she talks to people who aren't there. It can be hard to watch." "I've seen a lot of hard things," Marcus said gently. "I can handle it." Danny opened the door. The apartment was small but clean. Despite Danny's financial struggles, he had clearly put effort into making it comfortable. There were photographs everywhere, images of a younger Ruth with her husband, with her son Raymond, with a baby Danny. A lifetime of memories preserved on the walls. In a worn recliner by the window sat Ruth Reeves. She was small and frail, with silver hair and cloudy blue eyes that seemed to look at something far away. She was wearing a housecoat and slippers, and her thin hands were folded in her lap. A television played softly in the corner, but she wasn't watching it. "Grandma," Danny said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "I brought someone to meet you." Ruth turned her head slowly. Her eyes focused on Marcus, and for a moment confusion flickered across her face. Then suddenly her expression transformed into radiant joy. "Raymond," she exclaimed, reaching out with trembling hands. "Raymond, you're home. I knew you'd come back. I prayed every night and God brought you back to me." Danny closed his eyes in pain, but Marcus didn't hesitate. He knelt beside the old woman and took her hands in his. "Hello, Mrs. Reeves," he said gently. "It's good to see you." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "They told me you were dead. They said you died in that terrible accident, but I knew it wasn't true. A mother knows. A mother always knows." Marcus squeezed her hands. "I'm here now, Everything is going to be okay." Ruth smiled, and for a moment the clouds in her eyes seemed to clear. She looked at Marcus with an intensity that was almost lucid. "You take care of my Danny," she whispered. "He's been so strong, so brave. But he needs someone to take care of him for a change. Promise me you'll protect him." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was a sacred trust. "I promise," he said. "I'll protect him with my life." Ruth nodded, satisfied. Then her eyes drifted away again, back to whatever distant place her mind inhabited. She began humming softly a lullaby from another era. Danny helped Marcus to his feet, and they walked to the kitchen out of Ruth's earshot. "Thank you," Danny whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For not correcting her, for letting her believe even just for a moment." "She's not wrong," Marcus said. "Your father is here. He's in you, in your courage, your determination, your love for her. He never really left." Danny broke down, then sobbing silently, years of grief and exhaustion pouring out of him. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder and let him cry. After a few minutes, Danny composed himself. He wiped his face and looked at Marcus with red-rimmed eyes. "What do I do now? I can't leave her alone, but I can't afford the memory care facility anymore. I don't have any options left." "Yes, you do," Marcus said. "You have me. Tonight you stay here with your grandmother. Lock the doors, don't answer for anyone you don't know. Tomorrow, you come to the fight. And after I win, we're going to figure this out together. I have resources. I have contacts. We're going to find a way." "But what if Victor sends someone tonight? What if he tries to hurt us?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Victor won't come here tonight. He's too confident. He thinks he's already won. He's sitting in his office right now imagining how he's going to humiliate me tomorrow. That arrogance is going to be his downfall." Marcus headed for the door, then stopped. "Danny, one more thing. Where does Victor live?" Danny looked surprised. "He's got a house in Scottsdale. Big place, gated community. Why?" "No reason," Marcus said. "Just gathering intelligence. Get some rest. Tomorrow changes everything." Marcus walked out of the apartment and down to the parking lot where his truck was waiting. Shadow greeted him with a soft whine and a wagging tail. He climbed into the truck and sat in the darkness thinking. Victor Crane had made his move. He had attacked Danny through proxies, destroying the young man's livelihood in a single afternoon. It was a calculated strike, designed to isolate and demoralize. But Victor had underestimated his opponent. Marcus wasn't going to wait for tomorrow's fight. He was going to apply pressure tonight. Not physically, but psychologically. He was going to let Victor know that the hunter had become the hunted. He started the truck and drove toward the Iron Dragon Academy. It was after 9 when Marcus arrived. The academy was closed, but lights were still on inside. Through the tinted windows he could see Victor in his office, talking on the phone, gesturing animatedly. Marcus parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, 3 men emerged from a side entrance. They were big, muscular, with the look of professional thugs. They climbed into a black SUV and drove away. Marcus memorized the license plate. Then he got out of his truck, walked across the street, and approached the front door of the academy. Shadow stayed in the truck, watching through the window. Marcus didn't knock. He simply stood there, visible through the glass arms folded, staring at Victor's office door. It took 30 seconds for Victor to notice him. The reaction was immediate. Victor's face went pale, then red, then purple. He slammed down the phone and stormed toward the front door, yanking it open. "What the hell are you doing here?" Victor demanded. "The fight is tomorrow. You can't just show up at my business." Marcus didn't move. He didn't blink. I know what you did to Danny. Marcus said, his voice flat and cold. I know you got him fired from all 3 jobs. I know you're trying to destroy him before I have a chance to fight for him. Victor's eyes flickered with something that might have been fear. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Marcus took a single step closer, and Victor involuntarily stepped back. And I want you to know something, Victor. I want you to understand it in your bones. What you did today, it didn't break Danny. It made me angry, and you really, really don't want me angry. Is that a threat? Victor tried to sound tough, but his voice cracked. It's a promise. Tomorrow when I step onto your mat, I'm not just going to beat you. I'm going to expose you. Every lie, every fraud, every crime, the fake certifications, the predatory contracts, the protection racket, the steroids, all of it. Victor's face went white. You don't know anything. I know everything. Marcus leaned in close enough to whisper. And after tomorrow, so will everyone else. Marcus turned and walked away, leaving Victor standing in the doorway, trembling with rage and fear. The psychological warfare had begun. But Marcus knew Victor wouldn't let this stand. Men like him couldn't tolerate being challenged. They had to respond with force, which was exactly what Marcus was counting on. He drove to a motel on the edge of town, checked into a room with a clear view of the parking lot, and settled in to wait. Shadow curled up on the bed beside him, alert even in rest. Marcus didn't sleep. He sat in a chair by the window, watching the darkness, waiting for the attack he knew was coming. At 2 a.m, headlights appeared at the edge of the parking lot. The black SUV. 3 figures emerged, moving quietly toward Marcus's room. They thought they were being stealthy. They thought they had surprise on their side. They had no idea what they were walking into. Marcus checked his watch, calculated the angles, and smiled. Time to go to work. The 3 men moved through the darkness like amateurs. They clustered together instead of spreading out. They whispered too loudly. They kept looking back at the SUV as if they might need to run. Marcus had dealt with insurgents who could move through a village without making a sound. These thugs were an insult. He slipped out the bathroom window while they were still fumbling with the room's front lock. Shadow followed silently, dropping to the ground without a sound. Together they circled around the building, positioning themselves behind the attackers. The first thug managed to pick the lock. He pushed the door open slowly, and all 3 crowded into the dark room, baseball bats raised. He's not in the bed, one whispered. Check the bathroom. Where's the dog? Marcus answered that question himself. Shadow take. The Belgian Malinois exploded from the darkness like a guided missile. He hit the nearest thug square in the chest, driving him backward into his companions. The man screamed as Shadow's jaws clamped onto his forearm, shaking him with controlled violence. The second thug swung his bat wildly, missing Shadow by a foot. Marcus stepped out of the shadows and caught the bat mid-swing. He twisted it out of the man's grip and drove the handle into his solar plexus. The thug folded like a lawn chair, gasping for air. The third thug turned to run. He made it 2 steps before Marcus swept his legs out from under him. The man hit the pavement hard, and before he could recover, Marcus had a knee on his back, and his arm twisted behind him at an angle that promised dislocation. Call Shadow off, the first thug screamed. Please, call him off. Shadow, hold. The dog released the man's arm, but stood over him, teeth bared, growling low in his chest. Marcus looked at the 3 beaten men. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. Who sent you? Marcus asked, though he already knew. I don't know any names, the man under his knee whimpered. Just a guy, big guy with a shaved head, said he'd pay us 500 each to mess you up. Victor Crane. I don't know his name. Please, man, I'm just trying to make some cash. I got kids. Marcus increased the pressure on the arm. You've got kids and you break into motel rooms to assault strangers. What kind of example is that? I'm sorry. We'll leave. We'll never come back. Just let us go. Marcus held him for another 10 seconds, letting the fear sink deep into the man's bones. Then he released the arm and stood up. Get out of here. All three of you. And when you see Victor Crane, tell him something for me. The three thugs scrambled to their feet, clutching their injuries. Tell him what? The first one asked, nursing his bitten arm. Tell him I'm coming, and tell him he's going to wish he'd never heard my name. The thugs ran for their SUV. The engine roared, and they peeled out of the parking lot, leaving behind nothing but the smell of burnt rubber and fear. Marcus looked down at Shadow. Good boy. Let's get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But Marcus didn't sleep. He spent the rest of the night preparing. He reviewed the documents he had gathered. The expulsion records from the Martial Arts Association, the business filings showing Victor's pattern of fraud, the photographs of the suspicious crates behind the academy, the notebook Marlene had given him with detailed records of the protection fees. By dawn, he had assembled a comprehensive dossier of Victor Crane's crimes. It was enough to destroy the man's reputation. It was enough to send him to prison. But Marcus wanted more than destruction. He wanted justice. He wanted the community to see Victor fall. He wanted every person who had ever been afraid of that bully to watch him crumble. The fight was scheduled for noon. Marcus had 6 hours to set the stage. He started making phone calls. The first call was to Chief Martinez. I need the DEA contact you mentioned, the one watching Victor Crane. Marcus, what are you planning? I'm going to hand them their case on a silver platter, but I need them ready to move today. Can you make that happen? Martinez was quiet for a moment. I'll make some calls. But if this goes sideways, I can't protect you. I don't need protection. I need witnesses. The second call was to Danny. Are you safe? Yeah. Grandma had a good night. She slept through everything. Are you okay? I heard there was some kind of disturbance at a motel. News travels fast. Victor's been bragging about it all morning. He told his students he sent guys to teach you a lesson. He said you probably ran back to wherever you came from. Marcus smiled grimly. He's about to find out how wrong he is. I need you at the academy by 11:30. Can you do that? I'll be there. And Danny, bring your grandmother. Silence on the line. Then, what, Marcus? She can barely understand what's happening. Why would I bring her? Because Victor used her to start this. She deserves to see how it ends. Trust me. Another pause. Okay. I trust you. And the third call was the most important. Marcus dialed the number for the local ABC affiliate news station. News desk, how can I help you? I have a story for you. A martial arts instructor who's been running a fraud and extortion operation for years. He's been kicked out of every legitimate organization, but he's still preying on families in Phoenix. I have documentation. I have witnesses. And in about 3 hours, I'm going to expose him publicly at his own academy. The voice on the other end perked up. That sounds interesting. Can you give me more details? I can do better than that. I can give you exclusive access. Be at Iron Dragon Combat Academy at noon. Bring cameras. You're going to want to see this. By 11 o'clock, Marcus was dressed and ready. He wore his navy dress whites pressed and pristine. The sealed trident gleamed on his chest. Every ribbon, every medal was in perfect position. This wasn't vanity. This was psychological warfare. Victor Crane had built his reputation on the illusion of martial authority. He wore flashy uniforms and claimed ranks he hadn't earned. He surrounded himself with symbols of power that meant nothing. Marcus was going to show him what real authority looked like. Shadow had been brushed until his coat shone. His tactical vest was clean and properly fitted, identifying him as a military working dog. He moved beside Marcus with the disciplined grace of a fellow warrior. They drove to the Iron Dragon Academy together, arriving at 11:45. The parking lot was already full. Word had spread through the community. Business owners, parents, students, curious onlookers. They had all come to witness the confrontation. Marcus spotted Marlene from the diner, standing near the entrance, her face tight with anxiety. He saw other faces he recognized from his investigation victims of Victor's schemes, who had heard that someone was finally standing up. And there, near the back of the crowd, he saw Danny. The young man was pushing a wheelchair. In it sat Ruth Reeves, looking confused, but alert. Danny had dressed her in her best clothes, and someone had done her hair. Marcus walked over to them. "Thank you for coming," he said. Ruth looked up at him, and for a moment recognition flickered in her cloudy eyes. "You're the young man from yesterday," she said. "The one who promised to protect my Danny." "Yes, ma'am, and I always keep my promises." Ruth reached out and took Marcus's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "My son Raymond was a Marine," she said. "He would have liked you. He always said the measure of a man is how he treats those who can't fight for themselves." Marcus felt something catch in his throat. "Your son was a wise man, Mrs. Reeves. He was the best man I ever knew." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "Until that monster took advantage of me. Until he hurt my Danny. But you're going to make it right, aren't you?" "Yes, ma'am, I am." Ruth nodded, satisfied. Then her eyes drifted away again, back to whatever distant place her mind inhabited. Danny looked at Marcus with desperate hope. "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Stay with your grandmother. Keep her safe. And no matter what happens in there, don't look away. I want Victor to see your face when he falls." The doors of the academy opened, and a wave of sound poured out. Aggressive music, shouting voices, the buzz of anticipation. Marcus walked toward the entrance. The crowd parted before him like water before the prow of a ship. The moment he stepped through the doors, the atmosphere changed. Victor Crane was standing in the center of the mat, surrounded by his students and sycophants. He was wearing a crimson G embroidered with golden dragons, and his face was split in a confident grin. But when he saw Marcus in his dress whites, the grin faltered. "Well, well," Victor said, his voice booming through the speakers. "The sailor actually showed up. I thought my boys scared you off last night." Marcus walked to the edge of the mat and stopped. Shadow sat beside him, perfectly still. His amber eyes locked on Victor. "Your boys are in the hospital," Marcus said. His voice was calm, carrying across the room without effort. "They'll recover, eventually. But I don't think they'll be doing any more of your dirty work." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Victor's grin flickered. "Lies," Victor said. "You're just trying to intimidate me. It won't work. I'm a grandmaster. I've trained champions." "You're a fraud." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "This is your expulsion notice from the National Martial Arts Association, dated 5 years ago. It revokes all your certifications. It bans you from competing or teaching. Every belt you've awarded since then is worthless." The murmur became a roar. Parents pushed forward, demanding to see the document. Students looked at their teacher with dawning horror. "That's a forgery!" Victor screamed. "He faked it. He's trying to destroy me." "Call them." Marcus tossed the document onto the mat. "The phone number is right there. Call the association. Ask them yourself." Victor's face went purple with rage. "I don't need to prove anything to you. You challenged me. You came to my house. Now get on this mat and fight me like a man." Marcus began unbuttoning his dress jacket. Slowly. Deliberately. "You want to fight, fine. But we're going to do this properly. We're going to make a wager." "What kind of wager?" "If you win, I leave Phoenix. I apologize publicly for slandering you. I pay you $50,000 for defamation." Victor's eyes widened with greed. "And if you win, if I win, you void every fraudulent contract you've signed in the past 5 years. You refund every protection fee you've extorted from the businesses in this neighborhood, and you apologize to Danny Reeves on your knees in front of everyone here." The crowd erupted. Parents were shouting. Business owners were pressing forward. Someone was crying. Victor looked around, realizing he had lost control of the narrative, but his ego was too enormous to permit retreat. "Deal!" he screamed. "I accept, and when I break your arm, I'm going to make you crawl out of here on your belly." Marcus finished removing his jacket and handed it to Marlene, who had pushed through the crowd to stand near him. "Hold this for me," he said quietly, "and hold on to the documents in the inside pocket. After the fight, you're going to want to show them to the nice people from the news station." Marlene's eyes widened. "There's news people here. Channel 5. They're setting up right now." Marcus stepped onto the mat. He was wearing a plain white t-shirt underneath his jacket, and his muscles moved beneath the fabric with the easy grace of a predator. Victor circled him, bouncing on his feet, throwing practice punches at the air. "You're going to regret this," Victor snarled. "I've broken men twice your size." "You've broken boys and old women," Marcus replied. "You've never faced a real warrior in your life." Victor attacked. It was a spinning hook kick, flashy and theatrical, designed to impress audiences rather than defeat opponents. Marcus saw it coming from a mile away. He simply stepped back, letting the kick sail past his face. Victor stumbled his momentum, carrying him too far. He recovered and threw a combination of punches wild and angry. Marcus slipped the first, ducked under the second, and parried the third with a slight deflection of his forearm. He wasn't fighting back. He was studying, cataloging weaknesses, waiting for the perfect moment. "Fight me!" Victor screamed. "Stop running and fight me!" Marcus stopped moving. He planted his feet and offered a stationary target. "Show me what you've got, Grandmaster." Victor roared and threw a haymaker, putting all his weight behind it. It was a brawler's punch, the kind of move that worked in bar fights, but was suicide against a trained combatant. Marcus caught Victor's wrist with his left hand. His right hand clamped onto Victor's elbow. Using the man's own momentum, Marcus pivoted and drove his shoulder into Victor's armpit. The throw was textbook perfect. Victor flew through the air and slammed onto the mat so hard that the impact echoed through the room. Before he could draw a breath, Marcus was on top of him, twisting his arm into a joint lock that sent lightning bolts of pain through Victor's shoulder. "Stop!" Victor screamed. "I tap, I yield!" Marcus didn't release him. He leaned down his mouth inches from Victor's ear. "You thought you could destroy a 19-year-old kid because he spilled water on your motorcycle. You thought you could steal from an old woman with dementia. You thought you could extort honest business owners and sell fake certifications to parents who trusted you." Marcus increased the pressure. Victor screamed. "You were wrong." Finally, Marcus released the hold and stood up. The entire fight had lasted less than 45 seconds. Victor lay on the mat, clutching his shoulder, tears streaming down his face. His crimson GI was twisted and stained with sweat. His students stared at him with a mixture of shock and disgust. The crowd was silent. Then someone began to clap. It was Ruth Reeves. Danny had wheeled her to the edge of the mat, and she was clapping her thin hands together, her cloudy eyes suddenly sharp and clear. "That's what you get," Ruth said, her voice carrying across the room. "That's what happens to bullies. My Raymond would have done the same thing." When the applause spread, Marlene joined in, then the parents, then the business owners. Within seconds, the entire room was cheering. But Marcus wasn't finished. He walked over to Danny and gently guided the wheelchair to the center of the mat. Then he turned to Victor, who was struggling to his feet. "Get on your knees," Marcus said. "What? You heard me. Get on your knees and apologize to this young man. Apologize for humiliating him in public. Apologize for getting him fired from his jobs. Apologize for stealing from his grandmother." Victor's face twisted with rage and humiliation. "I won't. You can't make me." "You're right. I can't make you. But they can." Marcus gestured to the crowd. They had stopped cheering. Now they were advancing, forming a ring around the mat, their faces hard with years of suppressed anger. Marlene stepped forward. "You took $500 a month from me for 3 years, Victor. That's $18,000. Apologize." A man in a mechanic's uniform stepped up beside her. "You threatened my family. My kids had nightmares. Apologize." One by one, the victims emerged. Business owners, parents, former students. They surrounded Victor like a closing fist, demanding the acknowledgement of their suffering. Victor's arrogance crumbled. Without his muscle, without his intimidation, without his lies, he was just a pathetic middle-aged man in a ridiculous costume. He fell to his knees. "I'm sorry," Victor whispered. "Louder," Danny said. His voice was steady now, stronger than it had been since Marcus met him. "Say it louder." "I'm sorry," Victor shouted. "I'm sorry for everything." Danny looked down at the man who had tormented him for months. The man who had grabbed his hair and dragged him to his knees. The man who had tried to destroy his life. Then Danny did something unexpected. He reached down and offered Victor his hand. "I forgive you," Danny said. "Not because you deserve it, but because I'm not going to carry this anger anymore. It's too heavy." Victor stared at the offered hand, his face a mask of confusion. He didn't understand forgiveness. He didn't understand mercy. But he took Danny's hand and let the young man help him to his feet. The doors of the academy burst open. 3 men in suits walked in, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. One of the suits held up a badge. "DEA, Victor Crane, you're under arrest for distribution of controlled substances fraud and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." Victor's face went white. "What? No. This is a setup." "We've had you under surveillance for months," the agent said, cuffing Victor's hands behind his back. "We just needed someone to give you a push. Thanks for stepping into the spotlight." As they led Victor away, he locked eyes with Marcus. "Who are you?" Victor demanded. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus smiled. "I'm just a sailor who keeps his promises." The news cameras captured everything. Victor's arrest, the cheering crowd, Danny standing tall beside his grandmother, and Marcus Cole, Navy SEAL, walking out into the Arizona sun with Shadow at his side. The story led the evening news. By morning it had gone national. The hours following Victor Crane's arrest were a blur of flashing cameras, shouted questions, and tearful embraces. Marcus stood near his truck, watching the chaos unfold. Police cars lined the street. News vans from 3 different stations had their satellite dishes pointed at the sky. Reporters were interviewing anyone who would talk, and everyone wanted to talk. Years of fear and silence had been shattered in a single afternoon. Marlene pushed through the crowd toward Marcus, her weathered face streaked with tears she wasn't bothering to hide. "I can't believe it's over," she said. "I can't believe someone finally stopped him." "It's not over," Marcus replied. "Victor is just the beginning. There are going to be investigations, lawsuits, recovery efforts. The community is going to need to come together." "We will. For the first time in years, I actually believe we will." Marlene grabbed Marcus's hand. "You gave us something today. Something more valuable than money or safety. You gave us hope. Marcus squeezed her hand. You had it all along. You just needed someone to remind you. A commotion near the academy entrance drew their attention. Detective Frank Mercer Victor's brother-in-law was arguing loudly with the DEA agents. His face was red with fury, and he was gesturing wildly at Marcus. "This is entrapment," Mercer shouted. "This whole thing was a setup. I want that man arrested for assault, for trespassing, for interfering with a police investigation." The lead DEA agent, a tall woman with steel-gray hair and cold eyes, didn't seem impressed. "Detective Mercer, I suggest you step back and consider your position very carefully. We have evidence that you've been suppressing complaints against Victor Crane for years. Internal Affairs has already been notified. I'd worry less about Mr. Cole and more about your own future." Mercer's face went pale. He looked around, searching for allies, but found only hostile stares. The community that had once feared him because of his connection to Victor now saw him for what he was, a corrupt cop who had enabled a predator. "This isn't over," Mercer hissed. "None of you know what you've done." He turned and stormed toward his unmarked car. As he passed Marcus, their eyes met. Mercer's gaze was filled with pure hatred. "You're a dead man," Mercer whispered. "You and that crippled kid. Victor has friends. Friends you can't touch." Marcus didn't flinch. "So do I, and mine are better." Mercer drove away, tires squealing. Marcus watched him go, filing the threat away for future consideration. Victor might be in custody, but the battle wasn't entirely won. Danny appeared at Marcus's side, pushing Ruth's wheelchair. The young man looked exhausted, but transformed. There was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "The news people want to interview me," Danny said. "They want to know about what Victor did to us. Should I talk to them?" Marcus considered the question. "That's your choice. But if you do be honest, tell them everything. The contract, the harassment, the jobs. Let people see what predators like Victor do to families like yours." Danny nodded slowly. "I've been invisible my whole life. People look at the prosthetic and look away. They see a cripple, a burden, a problem. Maybe if I speak up, someone else won't have to suffer like we did." Ruth reached up and took Danny's hand. Her eyes were cloudy again, but her grip was firm. "Your father would be so proud," she said. "My Raymond always said the truth sets you free. Tell them the truth, Danny." Danny bent down and kissed his grandmother's forehead. "I will, Grandma. I promise." Marcus watched Danny wheel Ruth toward the waiting reporters. The young man's shoulders were straight now. His prosthetic leg moved with confidence instead of shame. He had been transformed by the simple act of being seen, being valued, being defended. That was the real victory. Not the fight. Not the arrest. The real victory was watching someone who had been crushed discover that they could stand tall again. Marcus's phone buzzed. Chief Martinez. "I'm watching the news," Martinez said. "Nice work. The DEA is very happy. They've been trying to nail Crane for 2 years. It was a team effort. Don't be modest. This is going to make waves. Victor's network extends beyond Phoenix. The feds are already looking into his connections in 3 other states. You might have just taken down an entire organization." Marcus hadn't thought about the larger implications. He had been focused on Danny, on the community, on the immediate threat. But if Victor was part of a bigger network, there might be other predators out there. Other victims. "Is there anything else I can do?" "You've done enough for now. Enjoy the victory. Get some rest. And Marcus, your father would be proud too." The call ended, and Marcus stood alone for a moment, thinking about his dad. Thomas Cole had spent his life protecting the weak, fighting the strong, standing up when others sat down. He had died doing what he loved. Marcus wondered if his father had ever felt this way after a case. This mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. This awareness that one battle was won, but the war never really ended. "You okay?" Marcus turned. Danny had returned from his interview, leaving Ruth with Marlene. "I'm fine. How did it go?" "Terrifying," Danny admitted. "But also liberating. I told them everything. About the contract, about how Victor targeted Grandma because of her dementia, about the jobs, about the harassment. The reporter said it's going to be the lead story tonight." "How does that feel?" Danny thought about it. "It feels like I've been carrying a weight for 2 years, and someone finally helped me put it down. I didn't realize how heavy it was until it was gone." Marcus put a hand on Danny's shoulder. "That weight wasn't yours to carry alone. No one should have to fight that battle by themselves." "But what happens now?" Danny's voice carried a trace of the old fear. "Victor is arrested, but I still don't have a job. I still can't afford Grandma's care. The problems didn't disappear just because he did." Marcus smiled. "Actually, that's not entirely true. Come with me." He led Danny toward the DEA agent who had arrested Victor. The woman was finishing up paperwork near one of the bureau vehicles. "Agent Torres," Marcus said. "Do you have a minute?" The agent looked up. Her expression softened slightly when she saw Danny. "Mr. Cole, and this must be Daniel Reeves. I've heard a lot about you." "What's going to happen to Victor's assets?" Marcus asked. "The money he extorted, the contracts he forced people into?" Agent Torres nodded. "Standard procedure for racketeering cases. We freeze his assets, and after the trial, the court sets up a restitution fund. Victims who file claims can be compensated." "How long does that take?" "Could be a year, sometimes longer." Danny's face fell. A year was too long. His grandmother couldn't wait a year. Marcus had anticipated this. "What about the immediate term? Is there any way to expedite assistance for victims who are in crisis situations?" Agent Torres studied Danny for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card. "There's a victim advocacy organization we work with. They have emergency funds for situations exactly like this. Medical care, housing, immediate expenses. Call this number tomorrow. Tell them I sent you. They'll take care of you." Danny took the card with trembling hands. "Really? Just like that? Just like that? You helped us take down a criminal we've been chasing for years. The least we can do is make sure you and your grandmother are safe." Tears welled in Danny's eyes. "Thank you. I don't know how to thank you enough." Agent Torres smiled. "Thank Mr. Cole. He's the one who put this whole thing together. We just showed up for the arrest." As she walked away, Danny turned to Marcus. "Did you plan this? Did you know about the Victim Advocacy Fund?" "I did some research," Marcus admitted. "I wanted to make sure you were taken care of no matter what happened." Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he did something that caught Marcus off guard. He hugged him. It was an awkward hug, the kind shared by men who weren't used to physical affection, but it was genuine. Danny held on tight, his body shaking with suppressed emotion. "You saved my life," Danny whispered. "Not just from Victor, from giving up. I was so close to giving up." Marcus hugged him back. "You saved yourself. You kept fighting when anyone else would have quit. You took care of your grandmother when it would have been easier to walk away. That's not weakness, Danny. That's the definition of strength." They separated, and Danny wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "What happens now? With you, I mean. Are you staying in Phoenix?" Marcus had been thinking about that. His leave wasn't permanent. Eventually, he would have to return to duty, to the deployments and the missions and the life he had chosen. But something had changed in the last few days. Something had shifted in his understanding of what service meant. "I don't know," he admitted. "I came here to recover from an injury. I wasn't planning to stay. But maybe staying isn't the worst idea." Danny's face lit up. "You could open a gym. A real one. Teach people actual martial arts, not the fake stuff Victor was selling. The community would support you." "I know they would." Marcus laughed. "That's not a bad idea. But first we need to make sure Victor's mess is cleaned up. There are probably other victims we don't know about yet. Other families who were too scared to come forward." "I can help with that," Danny said eagerly. "I know the neighborhood. I know who Victor targeted. I can make a list." Marcus nodded. "Then that's what we'll do. Together." The afternoon stretched into evening. The news vans eventually left. The police finished their work. The crowd dispersed, but the energy remained. Something had fundamentally changed in this corner of Phoenix. A community that had lived in fear for years was rediscovering its voice. Marcus stayed until the last business owner had been interviewed, the last document had been collected, the last hand had been shaken. Shadow stayed with him, patient and vigilant, a silent partner in everything. Finally, as the sun began to set, Marcus found himself standing alone outside the now closed Iron Dragon Academy. The lights were off. The aggressive signage looked pathetic without the threatening presence behind it. Tomorrow the building would probably be sealed. Eventually someone else would move in. The black and red facade would be painted over, and the community would try to forget. But Marcus didn't think they should forget. He thought they should remember. Remember what fear cost them. Remember how close they came to losing everything. Remember that one person standing up could change the entire equation. His phone buzzed. A text from Danny. "Grandma is asking for you. She wants to say goodbye. Come to the apartment." Marcus drove to Danny's building as the last light faded from the sky. He climbed the stairs with Shadow at his side, his leg aching from the long day, but his spirit surprisingly light. Danny met him at the door. "She's been lucid for almost an hour. It's the longest she's been clear in months. I don't know if it's the excitement or what, but she keeps asking for the soldier who helped us." Marcus entered the small apartment. Ruth was sitting in her chair, but she looked different. Her eyes were focused, alert, tracking his movement as he approached. "There you are," Ruth said. Her voice was strong, clearer than Marcus had ever heard it. "Come sit with me, young man. I want to talk to you." Marcus pulled a chair close and sat down. Shadow settled at his feet, resting his head on his paws. Ruth reached out and took Marcus's hand. Her grip was warm and surprisingly firm. "Danny told me what you did," she said. "He told me about the fight, about the arrest, about everything. I want to thank you." "You don't need to thank me, Mrs. Reeves." "Yes, I do." Ruth's eyes were intense, burning with a clarity that seemed almost painful. "I've been lost for a long time. In my head, I mean. I know I'm not always here. I know I caused trouble for Danny. I know I signed that paper that started all this mess. That wasn't your fault. Victor targeted you because of your condition." "I know." Danny explained it. "But I still carry the guilt. Every day I'm aware enough to understand what happened, I feel that guilt." Ruth squeezed his hand. "You took that guilt away. Not just from me. From Danny. He's been blaming himself for not protecting me. Now he knows he's not alone." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. "Your son, Raymond. Danny told me about him." Ruth's eyes softened. "My beautiful boy. He was so much like you. Strong but gentle. Fierce but kind. He would have done the same thing you did. He would have walked into that building and faced down that monster without hesitation. He raised a good son. Danny has more courage than he knows. He has more courage than I knew, Ruth corrected. Until today I didn't see it. I saw a broken boy struggling to survive. Today I saw a man standing tall. You did that. You showed him who he could be. Ruth leaned forward, her eyes suddenly urgent. I don't have much time left. Not in life and not in my mind. The clear moments are getting fewer, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't leave him alone. Even when you go back to your service, even when you're far away, don't let him think he's alone. He spent 2 years believing no one cared. Today showed him differently. Don't let him forget. Marcus felt the weight of the request. It was a sacred trust passed from a dying mother to a stranger who had become family in the space of 3 days. I promise, he said. I'll watch over him, and I'll make sure he knows he's never alone again. Ruth smiled. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. Raymond sent you, she whispered. I know that sounds crazy, but I believe it. My son is gone, but he's still protecting us. He sent you to finish what he couldn't. Marcus didn't know what to believe about the afterlife, about fate, about the forces that brought people together. But he knew that something had guided him to that parking lot at exactly the right moment. Something had made him stop, made him intervene, made him care. Maybe it was Raymond Reeves. Maybe it was his own father. Maybe it was just the universe balancing its scales. It didn't matter. What mattered was the promise. I'll take care of them, Marcus said. Both of you. For as long as I'm able. Ruth nodded, satisfied. Then she leaned back in her chair, and the fog began to return to her eyes. The lucid moment was passing. Danny, she called. Danny, where are you? Danny rushed to her side. I'm here, Grandma. I'm right here. Ruth looked at him with confusion, then recognition, then love. There's my boy, she said softly. My beautiful boy. You look just like your father. Danny knelt beside her chair, holding her hand, tears streaming down his face. Marcus stood quietly and moved toward the door. This was a family moment, and he didn't want to intrude. But Danny looked up and caught his eye. Thank you, Danny mouthed silently. Marcus nodded. He didn't need to say anything. The words had already been spoken. The promises had been made. Shadow rose and followed Marcus out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the cool Phoenix night. The mission was complete. Victor Crane was in jail. The community was healing. Danny and Ruth were safe. But Marcus knew this wasn't really an ending. It was a beginning. The beginning of something he hadn't anticipated when he drove into Phoenix looking for a place to recover. He had found a purpose. A reason to keep fighting. A reminder of why he had taken the oath in the first place, to defend those who cannot defend themselves. Marcus climbed into his truck. Shadow jumped into the passenger seat, settling into his usual position with a contented sigh. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The legal proceedings would begin. Victor's network would need to be dismantled. The victims would need support as they rebuilt their lives. Danny would need guidance as he stepped into his new role as a voice for the community. But tonight, Marcus allowed himself a moment of peace. He had done what his father would have done, what Raymond Reeves would have done, what every good man should do when confronted with evil. He had stood up, and in standing up, he had reminded an entire community that they could stand too. The truck's engine rumbled to life. Marcus pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward his motel Shadow. Beside him, the Arizona stars spreading out above them like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Behind him, a city was waking up from a nightmare. And ahead of him, a future was taking shape that he never could have imagined. 2 weeks passed like a dream. The Iron Dragon Academy was officially closed by court order. The building owner, freed from Victor's intimidation, had already found new tenants. A non-profit organization that helped veterans transition to civilian life would be moving in next month. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Victor Crane's trial was scheduled for the fall. The prosecutor was confident. Between the DEA evidence, the testimony of dozens of victims, and the documented pattern of fraud spanning 4 states, Victor was looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. His assets had been frozen, and the preliminary restitution estimates suggested that most of his victims would be fully compensated. Detective Frank Mercer had been suspended pending investigation. 3 other members of his precinct had been implicated in covering up complaints against Victor. The Phoenix Police Department was undergoing its first major internal affairs investigation in a decade. The community was healing. Marlene's Diner had become an unofficial headquarters for the recovery effort. Former victims gathered there to share stories, coordinate legal claims, and support each other through the process. For the first time in years, people smiled when they walked down the street. They made eye contact. They said hello to strangers. Fear had been replaced by something Marcus hadn't expected: hope. Danny Reeves had become an unlikely spokesman for the victims. His interview on Channel 5 had gone viral, shared millions of times across social media. People were moved by his story. The young man with the prosthetic leg, who had lost his father, who cared for his grandmother with dementia, who had been systematically destroyed by a predator but refused to give up. Donations poured in from across the country. Enough to cover Ruth's care for the next 5 years. Enough to pay off the fraudulent contract. Enough to give Danny a fresh start. But Danny didn't want money. He wanted purpose. Marcus found him at Marlene's Diner on a Thursday morning, surrounded by paperwork and laptops. "What's all this?" Marcus asked, sliding into the booth across from Danny. "Applications." Danny said, his eyes bright with excitement. "I'm starting a non-profit for people like us, for families who get targeted by predators like Victor. Legal assistance, financial counseling, victim advocacy. I'm calling it the Raymond Reeves Foundation." Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest. "Your father's name. He spent his life protecting people. Now I'm going to continue his legacy." Danny pushed a document across the table. "I need a board member, someone with credibility, someone people trust." Marcus looked at the incorporation papers. His name was already typed in the first board position. "You were pretty confident, I'd say, yes?" "I was hopeful." Danny smiled. "You taught me to be hopeful again." Marcus picked up the pen. "Your grandmother knows about this. It was her idea. She had a good day yesterday. She remembered Dad clearly talked about him for hours. She said he would want his name attached to something that helped people. She said it was the best way to honor his sacrifice." Marcus signed the document without hesitation. "I'm honored." Danny's smile widened, but then his expression turned serious. "There's something else. I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I got a call this morning from a woman in Tucson. Her name is Sarah Crane." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Victor's wife. Ex-wife. They divorced 8 years ago. She's been trying to build a case against him ever since, but she never had enough evidence. She saw the news coverage. She wants to meet with us." "Why?" "She says Victor has a partner. Someone who's been funding his operations, helping him set up in new cities, protecting him from law enforcement. She says the arrest won't stop the network. There are other academies in other states, other victims being exploited right now." Marcus felt the familiar cold fire ignite in his chest. He had thought Victor was the head of the snake. Now it appeared he was just a tentacle. "When does she want to meet?" "Tomorrow. Phoenix Airport. She's flying in from Tucson." Marcus nodded slowly. Then we meet her. But Danny, I need you to understand something. If there's a bigger network, this gets dangerous. Really dangerous. These aren't strip mall bullies. These are organized criminals. Danny's expression hardened. I know, and I'm not backing down. Not anymore. I spent 2 years being a victim. Now I'm going to be a warrior, like my dad. Like you. Marcus studied the young man across from him. The broken teenager he had met 2 weeks ago was gone. In his place sat someone transformed by adversity, forged by pain, ready to fight for others who couldn't fight for themselves. It was the most beautiful transformation Marcus had ever witnessed. All right, Marcus said. Tomorrow. But first I need to make a phone call. He stepped outside and dialed Chief Martinez. Marcus, I was wondering when you'd check in. The DEA is very happy with how things turned out. It's not over, Chief. There's a bigger network. Victor was just a franchise. Someone else is running the show. Martinez was quiet for a moment. That tracks with what we're hearing. There have been similar operations in Texas, Florida, and Nevada. Same pattern. Predatory contracts, extortion, steroid distribution. We assumed they were copycats, but if they're connected, I need everything you can find. Every similar case in the last 10 years. Every complaint, every arrest, every suspicious death. If there's a pattern, I'm going to find it. Marcus, this isn't your fight anymore. You're on medical leave. Let the feds handle it. The feds have been trying to handle it for years. They need someone on the ground. Someone who can move without bureaucratic restrictions. Someone who doesn't care about making a clean case as long as the predators go down. Martinez sighed. You're going to do this with or without my help, aren't you? You know me. Yeah, I do. That's what worries me. A pause. I'll send you what I can. But Marcus, be careful. Men who run operations like this don't go down easy. They've got resources connections, and they've killed before. So have I. Marcus ended the call and looked up at the Arizona sky. The sun was high and bright, but he felt the shadows gathering. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, Marcus and Danny drove to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. Sarah Crane was waiting in a coffee shop near the arrivals terminal. She was a woman in her mid-40s with tired eyes and the nervous energy of someone who had been looking over her shoulder for years. Thank you for meeting me, Sarah said as they sat down. I know this must seem strange. It seems necessary, Marcus replied. Tell us what you know. Sarah took a deep breath. I was married to Victor for 12 years. I knew he was a fraud from the beginning. The fake certifications, the predatory contracts, I saw it all. But I didn't know about the rest until later. What rest? The organization. They call themselves the Phoenix Network. Ironic, right? They've been operating for at least 15 years. Martial arts academies, fitness centers, supplement distribution. It looks legitimate on the surface, but underneath, it's extortion, money laundering, and worse. Danny leaned forward. Who runs it? A man named Alexander Cross. He was Victor's mentor. He taught Victor everything, set him up in business, provided the capital, and took a cut of everything Victor made. Sarah's hands were trembling. Cross is dangerous, much more dangerous than Victor ever was. Why didn't you go to the police? Sarah laughed bitterly. I tried. Twice. The first time a detective told me there wasn't enough evidence. The second time I got a visit from 2 men who made it very clear what would happen to me and my daughter if I didn't keep my mouth shut. Marcus's expression hardened. Where is your daughter now? Safe. She's with my sister in California. I sent her away years ago when I realized how deep this went. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. But I've been gathering evidence ever since. Bank records, correspondence, photographs. I knew someday someone would come along who could actually use it. She pushed the folder across the table. Victor's arrest made the news. Cross is going to distance himself, cut Victor loose, pretend he never existed. But if you can connect the dots before he cleans up the evidence, you can bring down the whole network. Marcus opened the folder. The documents inside were meticulous, devastating. Wire transfers between shell companies. Photographs of Victor with a silver-haired man at various locations. Internal communications discussing expansion plans, protection payments, and something called the retirement program. "What's the retirement program?" Marcus asked. Sarah's face went pale. "That's what they call it when someone becomes a liability. When a victim threatens to go public when a franchise owner gets arrested when anyone knows too much. They retire them. They kill them. They make them disappear. No bodies, no evidence, just gone." Sarah's voice cracked. "I've been living in fear for 8 years, waiting for them to decide I'm a liability. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. Not after what Victor did to those families. Not after what he did to that boy." She looked at Danny, tears streaming down her face. "I saw your interview. I saw the way you talked about your father, your grandmother. I saw the pain you've been carrying. And I realized that my silence was part of the problem. By staying quiet, I let Victor hurt more people. I let the network grow. I'm responsible for some of what happened to you." Danny reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. The gesture surprised Marcus, but it felt right. "You're not responsible," Danny said gently. "You were a victim too. We all were. But now we can stop it together." Sarah broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Danny let her cry, offering silent support, while Marcus studied the documents. The picture was becoming clear. Alexander Cross was the kingpin. He had built an empire on the suffering of vulnerable people, using men like Victor as frontline soldiers in a war against the weak. He was insulated by layers of protection, but he wasn't invincible. No one was invincible. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I know who you are. I know what you're planning. Walk away or join the retirement program." Marcus showed the text to Danny and Sarah. Both went pale. "He's watching us," Sarah whispered. "He knows." "Good," Marcus said. "Let him watch. Let him know I'm coming." He typed a response. "I don't walk away. Ask Victor Crane." The reply came seconds later. "Victor was weak. You're making a mistake." Marcus smiled grimly. "No, you made the mistake. You hurt the wrong people. Now I'm going to hurt you." He put the phone away and looked at Danny and Sarah. "This just became more dangerous. Both of you need to understand that. Cross isn't going to wait for us to build a case. He's going to come at us hard and fast." Danny's jaw set with determination. "I'm not running." Sarah wiped her tears and straightened in her chair. "Neither am I. I've been running for 8 years. I'm done." Marcus nodded. "Then we work together. Sarah, you're coming back with us. We'll set you up somewhere safe. Danny, you're going to help me go through these documents. We need to find Cross's weak points, his vulnerabilities, anything we can use." "What about the authorities?" Sarah asked. "Shouldn't we give this to the DEA?" "We will, eventually. But right now the DEA is bound by rules that Cross knows how to exploit. He's got lawyers, he's got connected friends, and he's got years of practice staying invisible. If we hand this over too soon, he'll disappear. He'll start fresh somewhere else, and the cycle continues." Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a tone of absolute certainty. "I'm not going to let that happen. We're going to dismantle his network piece by piece. We're going to expose every crime, every victim, every dollar he's stolen. And when we're done, Alexander Cross is going to be sitting in a cell next to Victor Crane, wondering how a Navy SEAL and a 19-year-old with a prosthetic leg brought down his entire empire." Danny smiled. It was the smile of a warrior. Where do we start? The next week was a blur of activity. Marcus set up a command center in his motel room. Documents covered every surface. Photographs were pinned to the walls. A map of the United States had red pins marking locations where the Phoenix network had established operations. Shadow watched it all with patient attention, occasionally nudging Marcus when he forgot to eat or sleep. Danny proved to be an invaluable partner. His attention to detail was extraordinary. He found connections Marcus had missed, patterns in the financial records that revealed the network's structure. The young man who had delivered pizzas 2 weeks ago was now hunting predators with the focus of a trained investigator. Sarah provided context and insight. She knew the players, the history, the internal dynamics. Her 8 years of fear had been channeled into meticulous documentation. She was a treasure trove of intelligence. But the greatest development came from an unexpected source. Ruth Reeves had a breakthrough. Danny called Marcus in the middle of the night, his voice trembling with excitement. "You need to come, right now. Grandma's awake, really awake, and she's asking for you." Marcus drove to the apartment, climbing the stairs with Shadow at his side. Danny met him at the door, his eyes wet with tears. "I don't know how to explain it," Danny whispered. "She just woke up, clear as a bell, like the last 2 years never happened." Marcus entered the apartment. Ruth was sitting at the kitchen table, dressed in regular clothes, a cup of tea in her hands. She looked up when Marcus entered, and her eyes were sharp-focused, completely present. "There he is," Ruth said. "The guardian angel who saved my grandson." Marcus sat across from her, struggling to process what he was seeing. "Mrs. Reeves, how are you feeling? Like I've been asleep for a very long time and I finally woke up." Ruth reached across the table and took his hand. "I remember everything. The fog, the confusion calling Danny by his father's name. It's like watching a movie of someone else's life. But I also remember you. The man who knelt beside my chair and promised to protect my family." "The doctor said this could happen," Danny interjected. "Temporary remissions. They're rare, but they're possible. We don't know how long it will last, but right now she's here. She's really here." Ruth squeezed Marcus's hand. "I don't know how much time I have, but I needed to see you. I needed to thank you properly while I still can." "You don't need to thank me, Mrs. Reeves." "Yes, I do. And not just for Victor." Ruth's eyes glistened. "I've been watching even when I couldn't respond. I saw how you changed Danny. He was broken when you found him, crushed under a weight he never should have carried alone. And you lifted that weight. You showed him he could stand tall." She turned to look at her grandson with overwhelming love. "Raymond would be so proud. Our boy has become a man. A good man. The kind of man who stands up for others." Danny broke down, falling to his knees beside his grandmother's chair. Ruth wrapped her arms around him, holding him the way she had when he was a child. "My beautiful boy," she whispered. "My brave, beautiful boy." Marcus stood quietly watching the scene. Something fundamental was healing in this small apartment. Something that had been wounded for 2 years was finally finding peace. After a few minutes, Ruth looked up at Marcus again. "You're going after the rest of them, aren't you? The people who hurt us. The network." "Yes, ma'am, I am." Ruth nodded. "Good. Don't stop until they're all gone. Don't let anyone else suffer what we suffered." "I won't. I promise." Ruth smiled, and for a moment she looked decades younger. "Raymond chose well when he sent you to us. Go now. Finish what you started. And know that this family will always be praying for you." Marcus bent down and kissed Ruth's forehead. "Take care of each other." "We will," Danny said, rising to his feet. But I'm not leaving the fight. Grandma understands. Ruth nodded. My grandson is a warrior now, just like his father, just like you. I won't hold him back. Marcus and Danny left the apartment together, Shadow padding along beside them. How do you feel? Marcus asked. Terrified, Danny admitted. She could slip back into the fog any moment, but also grateful. I got to really talk to her again. I got to see her see me. Whatever happens now, I have that. That's all any of us can ask for. Moments of clarity, moments of connection. We hold on to them. They drove back to the motel. The work was waiting. Alexander Cross was waiting. The next battle was waiting. But for now, Marcus allowed himself a moment of peace. He had come to Phoenix to recover from a wound. Instead, he had found a family. He had found a purpose. He had found a reason to keep fighting when the world tried to convince him that fighting was pointless. Danny Reeves had been a broken teenager delivering pizzas. Now he was a warrior standing tall. Ruth Reeves had been lost in a fog of dementia. Now she had found clarity, even if only for a moment. Sarah Crane had been a woman hiding in fear. Now she was a witness preparing to bring down an empire. And Marcus Cole, Navy SEAL, had been a man searching for meaning. Now he had found it. The sun was rising over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Marcus stood outside his motel room, watching the light spread across the city. Shadow pressed against his leg, loyal as always. Time to go to work, buddy, Marcus said. Alexander Cross had no idea what was coming. He had built his empire on fear and silence, on the belief that vulnerable people wouldn't fight back. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Because Marcus Cole didn't fight for glory. He didn't fight for money. He didn't fight for recognition. He fought for the boy with the prosthetic leg who refused to quit. He fought for the grandmother who remembered her son. He fought for every victim who had ever been told they were alone. And he would never stop fighting. Not until the wolves learned that the sheep had a guardian. Not until the predators understood that their hunting days were over. Not until justice was served and the broken were made whole. That was his oath. That was his purpose. That was his calling. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of courage and compassion, please share it with your friends and family. You never know who might need this message of hope today. And if you want to hear more stories about honor sacrifice and standing up for what's right, please make sure to subscribe to our channel. May God bless you with the strength to face your battles and the wisdom to know you're never alone. May He protect your family and guide your steps in peace. And may you always remember that one person standing up can change the entire world. If you believe that good will always triumph over evil, please type Amen in the comments below. Stay strong, stay faithful, and God bless.